My name is Teresa Cameron, and I open to Pure Source and share. That's my gift. I allow that energy to flow through you, and people who are sensitive to energy will probably start feeling it. I just share. That really is what I do. In that space, I see things, I hear things, I know things. And that's really informative for me to be able to tap into you and get information on an individual level. So know that as I'm talking about the scary stuff, this is really in honor of Halloween. If you're a little skittish, I know my girlfriend here, she might start crying, but yeah. I only work in Pure Source. The scary stuff is a very protected space here, so I'm not asking anything to come in. I'm not allowing anything to come in. This is just, I guess, a little bit of fun for Halloween. And feel free to ask questions at any point in time as well. So I was born very sensitive, and some of my earliest memories were seeing angels. But also with those angels, I saw the scary stuff. I saw those screaming entities kind of flying at me. I always knew I was extremely protected, but it didn't stop it from scaring me. When you're 3, 4, 10, 15, 25, 40, and you've got these screaming entities trying to get at you, it's a little disconcerting. So I was extremely, like I said, I always knew I was protected, and I always felt that as I kind of went through a little bit harder times. So everybody has those in their lives, things get a little more difficult, people get sick, it's just, you feel a little down. That's when those energies would kind of come screaming a little bit more strongly at me, trying to disconnect me, I'll say. Now, at that time, I had no idea what was going on. I just knew I was protected. My poor husband used to, he always knew I was sensitive. He knew that I saw things and saw things. And I'd be up and screaming across the bedroom because something was hovering over my bed. So, of course, he had no sense of any of that, and that was good. He didn't really think I was crazy. He did know, he believed, but he really didn't want to hear about these things, which was fine with me. But as I stepped into my own strength, and it really came about through meditation, the information started to come through, this energy that I felt compelled to share. From my very first meditation, I just started opening up. And that's put me on a journey of trying to figure out what was going on with me, why I was so much more sensitive, so much more in tune, why I really felt in that meditative space that I had to share and I didn't understand. So I started kind of a bit of an investigation, and I had a wonderful man who's a medium say to me, well, my dear, you're a medium, and all you have to do is ask for the light, and these entities believe they can't stay in this space. As soon as the light is brought in, they can't deceive, they can't lie, they can't stay if they're not welcome. And I tell you, I wish I'd learned that at 2 years old. So if any of you do have children that are sensitive and they're having night terrors, they're telling you things that sound bizarre to you, tell them about the light. Physically actually give them a flashlight that allows them to turn it on and associate that with that safe space. So most of us are connected, we are connected to Pure Source. Most of us are protected. But what happens is these heavier entities, and it doesn't matter if they're in energetic form or if they're in human form. Please know there's not really a lot of difference. They feel the same. In fact, last weekend I had a psychic attack on me. And I found it quite amusing because I was doing a talk and these two women who really looked like witches to me when they walked in, and they kind of noted that, sat at the back of the room, rolling their eyes and puffing, and they sat through the entire half-hour lecture. And I fleetingly thought, why the heck are they even here if they're really, really not engaged? But it didn't really matter. I mean, I had a very large audience, and there were so many people that were connecting to Pure Source. I could see it in their faces, and it really, it was just kind of a background thing. But when I got to my booth and I started working, I could hear, and I knew it wasn't mine, but I could hear, you don't belong here. You have nothing to offer. It's time to leave. All of those things that we quite often get, that mind chatter in our head saying you're not worthy, you're not, you have nothing to share. But I knew, I very much could feel it was from outside me. And I wasn't quite sure if it was actually somebody else's mind chatter I was tapping into. There was a lot of mediums and psychics around me, so I wasn't sure if that's kind of what I was picking up. So I just went, kind of swatted it away, went back to working on my client, and just went deeper into that space, so it just wasn't even acknowledged there at that point. And when I was finished with that gentleman, I asked my assistant if somebody had been around and, kind of looking at me, and she told me, oh yeah, those two ladies that look like witches were standing in the middle of the aisle glaring at you, and they were there for so long that people were stopping and, like, what the heck are you guys doing? And that was what I was hearing. They were actually standing there intentionally sending me those negative thoughts and energies. And I thought, wow, I've never experienced it so vividly on a human level before. But I think what had happened was they came in and they could feel that light, and they were probably threatened by that and trying to undermine. And I really felt that that's what they do. They go around and send these negative energies into people's thoughts. So, really coming into recognizing your own mind chatter, that's a big one. Recognizing it. So when you do get something else that isn't your own little chattery mind, which those can be very self-defeating in themselves, that you can understand that it's somebody else or something else sending that message into you. You can refuse it. It's like somebody coming knocking at the door. You've got somebody who lives across the street who is angry and just aggressive, and you just do not want them in your home. You have every right to say, you know what, you're not welcome here, shut the door on them. But when it's in an energetic space, we often don't understand that we have that exact same power. We do not need to let it in. We can hear it and go, yeah, that's that angry neighbor across the street yelling again. Son. And then that's done. You don't need to invite them in. One woman told me, you know what, I invite them in and sit down to tea with them. And I said, you know what, you don't have to. Take the teacup away and kick them out. And it really is standing in your own power. It is understanding that you have absolute control over the energies that come into you or who are around you. Again, whether they're in human form or energetic form. After this wonderful medium told me what was kind of going on for me and how much strength and power I did have myself, one of my, I'll say tests, to test this out, was probably the scariest experience in my life. But I was at home, I was in bed, and my husband was awake. He'd gone away to a conference, and he was gone for 2 nights. The first night, in the morning, that next morning, the bed shifts, and I thought, it was light out, so it was just getting, it was early, but it was getting light. And I thought, wow, it came home early, I wonder why. I rolled over to ask him, and it wasn't my husband sitting there. It was this very angry man in spirit form, and he looked at me and he said, so they got to my wife, and he proceeded to lean over and vomit. And I'm going, you got for the light, you got for the light, you got for the light. And he disappeared immediately and freaked the heck out of me. I had to hop out of bed and I could feel this warmth on my neck for about a half an hour, and it really did freak me out. But what that did, it gave me the understanding of how strong I was, because instantly he disappeared. The trick is remembering the path of the light. But when you go into that fear space, it really is, it really is that space of protection. And once you learn that, it's instant, it's automatic, it comes to me in meditation, it comes to me in dreams. What's happened for me now, because I work in this space so much, my frequency is elevated. I don't get those, I'm going to say, kind of attacks or undermines anymore. Every once in a while I'll see something pop into my peripheral and it's like, okay, you're not welcome here, but it's more of a curiosity space. And I'm very grateful for that. I do work with a lot of children who go through these similar things that I did when I was young. That scary stuff coming in, and it usually takes the form of something that really did scare them, a character on a TV show, that type of thing. But I had this wonderful little boy who was, I'd say, 10 years old, and his parents were kind of at wit's end. He couldn't go to sleep. He was getting, he was having a hard time focusing. He was really having a hard time. They understood that he was very sensitive, intuitively. Thank goodness. So, of course, coincidence, it was so-and-so gave my name, and anyways, he ended up with me, him and his mom. And he came in and he told me this such and such, whatever, comes screaming at him at night. And I said, okay, I get that, and I can sense it around you. But you realize it always stops at a certain spot. And he looked at me and he went, yeah. And I said, okay, you can only get so close. You can't get at me. No, you can't. And he never thought of that before, because he's gone into such a fear space of having this thing come screaming at him that's where he stays. He couldn't quite comprehend that it actually had a barrier around him that it couldn't get through. And so I explained that to him, and I said, it's widen that barrier, let's make it bigger. So when he does come in, maybe it's outside your house instead of inside your room and 3 feet from you. Let's expand that. I also work with this mom and learning how to, just really teaching her to actually psychically protect her son as well. She was very sensitive herself, and that's how she intuitively knew that he really was seeing things, but she couldn't kind of tap into that space on her own. So teaching her and him, and she was going to go home and teach the rest of the kids. And I said, give him a flashlight. When he calls for the light, he can physically turn this on, and he'll understand that the really do disappear and that protection around him. So here's this wonderful little boy who's being taught quite young. It would have been nice if he was younger, but being taught quite young that he has all that strength and power in himself and the protection around him to stop that from invading into his space and really taking him. I've worked with people, though, who haven't had that natural protection around them. And one of my first paying clients that I ever worked on, and I felt after her that, this is why I've been seeing these things all my life, was to strengthen me and to help me understand. But she walked into the room and I asked her how she was doing. She didn't answer me. She was very almost blank. And I thought, well, that's strange, but maybe she's a little rude or whatever. And she walked up and I just touched her. I usually touch front and back when I've got a client in front of me. And I continued to ask her a couple of questions with zero response. So I just thought, okay, well, I'll just get started. She just turned around in front of me and I put my hands on her. And literally this demon came screaming. It was like her head swiveled, but her head stayed forward. Back at me, screamed in my face, shot over my right shoulder and went to the corner of the room. And I'm like, I need some help. I'm not sure what's going on, but I really need some help. It took about 5 minutes for it to leave the room, and it was time. visually, I saw like castle turrets. It was trying to set up residence in that room, and there was no way I was allowing that. Once it took off out of the body, I said to her, wow, you've seen some scary stuff. And she started responding, well, how did you know? And she hadn't even known I asked her questions before that. And I said, well, I know because something just shot out of you. And I said, it feels like this demon has been in you for a long time. And I proceeded to explain how when something would happen and it would trigger her into a rage instead of just being a little bit pissed off. And I proceeded to explain that, these entities feed on anything negative and blow them up. And she said, you're just fogging my life. And I said, it feels like this came into you a long time ago. And she said, yeah, 22 years. I was pregnant with my daughter, and I was fighting a demon to keep it from taking my baby. And I thought I'd gotten rid of it. And I said, unfortunately, it attached to you instead of your daughter. But it didn't attach to your daughter, and that was her thing. She was protecting her baby. So after she left, I saw her a few weeks later. She looked like a different person. I have to say, if I didn't know who she was, I wouldn't have understood that this was the same woman. She was glowing. She had life in her. She had energy. She was smiling. And it was like a huge shift for her. Very, very unusual for her previous years. Sometimes, I get a lot of people, do I have an entity attached? Do I have an entity attached? Most of the time the answer is no. What happens for people is when they're feeling that heaviness and they're feeling, dragged down, they're feeling the energy draining, those are blockages. Those are things that are holding you stuck. Those aren't entities attached, sucking basically all that happiness out. Typically, that's not the case. Sometimes people be past and they're not quite ready. If people around them are sensitive, they sometimes kind of grab hold and stay rather than pass over. And I do get rid of, I'll say rough ones that way, you're helping them pass into the light. But sometimes those heavier entities are very well hidden. And I've worked on people where, I've been around them for a long, long time, and then all of a sudden they say just a word or two and out flashes this thing that takes over their face, and it really is like a nothing on your face. So it is something that I'm going to say most people do not have. But if you find that there's people around you that go into these unexplained rages, it could be that there is something around them that is feeding on anything negative. So fear is a big one. That fear can take over. People who are, I'm going to say, struggle with mental illness, oftentimes I see extremely sensitive people with no filters. So most of us are born with really strong filters. But what happens is they get bombarded and they can't distinguish between what's theirs, what's somebody else's, and that mind chatter can start getting louder and louder. So again, oftentimes they think they're possessed. People think that, they deserve to be on medication. Unfortunately, when that happens, it even lowers your filter even more. So I do see a lot of that in that. But again, where I work in this space, everybody is on their own journey, learning their own lessons. And very much where I work, I have to be aware of that. I can't bring in other people's stuff to me. I am able to work and shift and leave that with you. Every single person is learning to connect, to grow into their own strength, and to have their own journey. On a spiritual level, those journeys are very much set out before we come into this state of being. We are with those, I mean, spiritual families, oftentimes again and again, learning those lessons. So wherever a person is, and I see it very much on the frequency level, on vibration, energetically, wherever they are is exactly where they're meant to be learning the lessons they're meant to be learning. If I was to take that from them, they wouldn't learn those lessons. I can help to shift and drop and elevate so that they are learning those lessons completely themselves. If there's people that are stuck in those heavier spaces that attract them, some people really attract those spaces, and they need to learn how to, again, step into their own power, move out of that need to constantly be, it's almost like testing themselves and then coming up short. It puts you in a fear space. Once you go into that fear space, what happens? Those energies feed on us and they get bigger. So most of you probably will never experience anything of what I'm talking about, which is a really good thing. But those spookies, those sleeves, those witches, those, you know, they are out there, and I have seen them, and it really is, you know, I used to be very fearful of that. I find it more curious than anything now, and I do know how deeply those spaces can affect people. So helping people to get themselves out those energies, those entities, they need to attract those things, and just moving into that other space of connection. And again, everything that I'm talking about, I'm not drawing it in. We're fully protected during that personal space. And again, some of you may energetically feel that going on, that shifting, that protection coming in and around you. So if some of you have experienced some of this, it could be that your protection, and I think that is exactly what's happening. Your protection is getting harder. They can't get as close. You'll be able to distinguish if it's yours, those little mind shadows, or if it's somebody else or something else trying to undermine you. Energetically, oftentimes in families, we have, I'm going to say contacts or lineages that attract certain vibrations, certain frequencies. When they're heavier and lower, you know, probably all of you could think of a family that just can't seem to get out of this certain place, whether it's poverty or fear or anger. They tend to move together. Eventually, or occasionally, some people in that family just don't vibrate there, and they come out of that. Those families actually have the ability to shift on a frequency level and raise, but what happens is they get caught there. So people, you know, those I'm going to say those anger spaces, those fear spaces, very much are frequencies that families, parents pass to their children, and it's never intentional, I can say that. Most parents absolutely do not want to pass on those types of frequencies to their kids, but that's what happens. You don't recognize where you're vibrating at. It automatically passes to your kids. So when you consciously choose to raise your own vibration, the people around you automatically start raising theirs. So it doesn't matter where you're starting from, exactly where you're supposed to be right now, learning exactly what you're supposed to be learning. And it really is all about that connection space to your source and your own frequencies being elevated and starting with your own power. Whether it's entities, whether it's people, it really doesn't matter. It's your power and your life. So, thank you very much. Is there any questions from anybody?
You only practice on the island? How often do you come to the mainland?
I only practice on the island, but most of my sessions are via phone because, yeah, I have a lot of clients in the United States and over in Europe. So I do phone sessions.
Because you're fabulous, so I'd like
Thank
to send
you.
people to you.
Thank you so much. Yes? Okay. Yeah, no problem. She said, what's your best tip for clearing your internal intuition? Purging? Oh, and purging, yes. The answer to that is connecting to Jesus. Ask for your own connection space. Just ask whether you use God, divine, the light, pure source. I use pure source because I work with a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, and it doesn't offend anybody. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. So all it takes is asking to connect to pure source. In that space, when you start connecting, that's where that clarifying, you start raising your own frequency. In that space, it's where your own intuition starts clarifying, start growing. And also in that space of connection to pure source, that's when your angels and guides can start coming in with information for you at a pure level. If any of you start getting visitors, ask them if they're from the light. Doesn't matter how shiny and pretty they look. Ask them if they're from the light. If they aren't, they just disappear. There's no lying in that space. If they are, and they stay, ask them what message they have for you. It's really beautiful. Once you start kind of connecting, it really is not a space you can think into. You have to feel it and have the faith that it's there. Even if you think you're getting nothing, trust me, it is starting to work. So again, there's some more layers to lay off before you start feeling that connection and understanding, seeing, sensing. You see things, and you really have that instinct, that feeling. So you have the feeling that things are going to happen. And yeah, so just connect with yourself. Yeah. So any other questions before we finish up? Yeah? Sure? She was just asking, when we eat food, she's heard that we actually absorb the frequency of that food. Who made it, where it came from, whether it was in a factory, whether it was organically grown. Yes, absolutely, 100%. Everything is frequency. I have a friend who is actually a farmer, and he raises cattle, and it's very, very important. He charges a lot of money for his beef. It's very, very important. These beef are treated very, very well. They are grass-fed, they're out in the pasture, and when it's time for them to be slaughtered, they have to do it very gently. Because what happens to the cattle is, if they, they're in these big, massive farms and they're just getting tunneled down and everything's getting their heads chopped off, they go into that fear space and it totally affects the beef. So, energetically, whether there's a strawberry grown, somebody who has put that seed in the ground and lovingly looked after it without pesticides, without really poisons or anything, picked it and then taken it and put it on the family table, is going to have a totally different frequency to it than something that's raised in this bulk massive farm where there's pesticides sprayed on it and it's whatever they do to ripen them unnaturally, and then they're picked and thrown in the plastic and shipped for 1,000 miles. There is totally a difference in that. When you connect with your source and you actually come into your own space, you start understanding on a frequency level what works for you and what doesn't. I'm really, myself, I'm attracted to very natural foods, things that aren't good for me. I've always been that way and I didn't understand kind of why. But again, it was my own natural intuition and frequencies that were really telling me, and I've always listened to them my whole life. So you know that what you're putting in your body is what, where it comes from. Is it healthy? Is it natural? Is it whole? We can't always eat perfect all the time, but it really, as a general rule, it's much better to eat things that are